In Goldenrod General Hospital, there is a certain floor where no medical treatments take place. It's usually close to empty, and it's so dreary it could drive any normal person crazy. If you are a resident of this floor, it means that you are beyond reach of modern medicine. You cannot be saved. It is on this particular floor that Claire meets up with Faulkner, who is getting discharged that very evening, and tells him that she will be escorting him back to Violet City. Never before has Claire felt so uncomfortable sitting next to another person in her whole life. Glancing at the person in question out of the corner of her eye did nothing to ease this feeling. Faulkner just looks so defeated, so lost as he stares outside the window at the dark streets passing by that it makes Claire want to tear the money from the taxi fare apart. Whenever something bothers her, she normally responds with aggression and all of the passion in her being, but this situation requires something she had limited resources in: patience. Claire has no patience for foolish whelps who did nothing but mope. She believes in taking action to solve her problems, and she wouldn't dare rely on anyone else's help. But even with her rigid standards, she could see that Faulkner deserved a bit of time to mourn what he lost. Faulkner was like her, in a way. He also believed in taking action to remedy whatever situation he found himself in instead of mooning over it. And right now, Claire couldn't see any actions available for him to take, and Faulkner himself could certainly see the same thing. To watch someone with similar principles as you get beaten down so badly and be left with nothing and nowhere to turn to, that's what's bothering Claire so greatly. The cab ride continues on in choked silence, just like this for a few more minutes, and then Faulkner's commanding voice rings out through the darkness. "Stop the car, now!" "What?" Claire blurts out. The driver sounds as surprised as Claire. You sure about this, sir? We're just over a bit halfway to your destination, and there won't be much traffic as this time or night, so stop the car!" Faulkner repeats, his voice sounding more and more dead with every syllable. The car screeches to a halt after the next turn. Faulkner shoves open the door. "Where do you think you're going?" Claire hisses after her fellow gym leader. Finally, snapped out of her shock as the turn of events, Faulkner, "Get back in here! Faulkner, damn it!" Claire jumps out of the cab, yelling over the shoulder at the poor driver to wait before storming after Faulkner into the night. Faulkner is relying heavily on his crutches and is in serious pain with every step on the sidewalk he takes, but Claire can't help but think that he moves awfully fast for an injured man. She grabs him by the shoulder. "Faulkner!" He roughly jerks away and continues hobbling down the dark sidewalk. Claire feels her patience wearing even thinner. She stays put and watches the young officer as he continued his pathetic limping. "Do you intend to walk the rest of the way back to Violet City like this? I know you're distraught, but for the love of God, have some common sense!" "I'm not going to Violet City," Faulkner shouts, without turning around or stopping. Claire is surprised yet again, but this is the first time she has heard him speak with so much raw emotion tonight. His voice is hoarse, guttural. It's like listening to a man who is drowning, with no way to save himself. "I'm not going back to Violet. Ever!" "What are you talking about?" Claire marches right up to Faulkner, maneuvering herself so she stands directly in his path. "If you planning on running away from your duties, Leader Faulkner, then as chairperson of the union, I'm afraid I'll have to relieve you." "Fine!" Faulkner shouts in her face. He tries to get around her, but Claire is relentless. "I get it. I really do. The League doesn't need an invalid in their ranks, and they sure as hell don't need me." "No, you don't get it, Faulkner," Claire responds with equal fervor, jabbing her finger in his chest for emphasis. "You don't get it at all, so stop acting all high and mighty in your misery and get back in the taxi." "Then explain it to me," Faulkner retorts bitterly, "because I sure as hell don't get what the fuck you are trying to tell me, lady." Claire gasped, her hands automatically striking Faulkner's cheek before her brain could give the order. "Curse me one more time and I'll force you back into the hospital," she threatens, her voice cold. "Get back in the taxi, now." "Get back in the taxi? For what?" Faulkner's glare is equally frosty, but his voice has reverted back to the lifelessness Claire has been acquainted with since picking him up from the hospital. This is not the first time she has heard it, but it disconcerts her all the same. There's nothing left for me, not in Violet City, and not anywhere else. My career as a gym leader is over. Everything I've worked so hard to achieve, all my efforts, wasted. My life is... He doesn't complete that last sentence, and his body begins to sag from fatigue, from the incredible weight on his shoulders, a burden that Claire could barely begin to understand. She doesn't try to block him when he readjusts his grip on his crutches and limps around her because right now, Claire doesn't know what else to say to him. Faulkner refuses to listen to reason, and he doesn't want to go home. She doesn't believe he wants to go back to that lonely private hospital room either. Claire can't stop thinking about what he had almost told her. His life is over. She can't stop thinking about his condition. She can't stop thinking that this could have been her. It could have been her suffering right now, with everything she has ever loved snatched away. What do you say to the man that has been tossed into a deep dark pit without preamble, without any means of escape? She closes her eyes and thinks harder. Metaphorically speaking, what would catch her attention if she were in Faulkner's shoes? Why is she even the one here with Faulkner right now? Morty, Jasmine, Price, or even Whitney would be better choices. So why did Price contact her out of all his acquaintances to pick Faulkner up from the hospital? Why is she being forced to weather through his misery? Claire opens her eyes and turns around at last. Faulkner is already a few yards away. Her irritation and unease with this situation is still present, and her patience is in tatters. But damn it if she didn't have her fellow gym leader's best interest at heart. At the same time, Claire decides to stop pretending to be Faulkner's friend because she isn't, and because she isn't one for empty theatrics. So, you don't plan on going back to Violet City anytime soon. Where are you headed then? Claire is used to addressing people across great distances, so her voice easily carries. Faulkner doesn't do anything to acknowledge her words and carries on down the concrete sidewalk. She tries again. Do you even know your way around, Goldenrod, Faulkner? This gets Faulkner's attention like nothing else. He pauses mid-limp, but he still doesn't try to turn around. Claire slowly approaches Faulkner, stopping just a few paces behind. She tells him in a patronizing voice, "If you insist on continuing this childish charade, I'll have no choice but to oblige you, Leader Faulkner. Where do you wish to go, if not home or to the hospital?" He doesn't offer a reply, and Claire has a hunch that Faulkner has no idea where he's headed right now, much less where he is, literally and metaphorically speaking. Her irritation flares up again. She could sympathize with his pain and loss, but she could not accept his refusal to lift himself out of this rut on his own terms. Claire lays a firm hand on Faulkner's shoulder. "Give me a minute to send away the cab, and I'll walk you to this cafe I haven't visited to in a long time." She gingerly lets go of him, partially mollified when he makes no visible effort to run away from her. Claire backtracks to the spot where the taxi is still parked and pays the sympathizing driver the fare, taking her time out to count the correct amount. Even then, Faulkner does not attempt to escape. Claire thinks that Faulkner still has some sense left in his head, despite all the warnings the doctors and the other gym leaders have given her. But when Claire finally returns to Faulkner's side, she recognizes something else lingering in his expression: defeat. It's the same emotion that was painted all over his face before at the hospital and while riding in the taxi. At this point, Faulkner probably wouldn't care less whether Claire plans to drag him to the hospital or not. Claire sighs aloud and starts walking with purpose, her destination clear in her mind. To her satisfaction, Faulkner is more or less keeping up with her despite the crutches and the fact that he'd just been discharged. She feels no need to walk slower for his benefit and only stops to wait for him whether they reach a street corner so she doesn't lose sight of him. The sounds and sights of the nightlife are barely registered by the silent pair. Claire in particular doesn't believe in wasting her breath with idle talk, and she assumes Faulkner isn't in the mood to chat either. She doesn't even take notice of how lively Goldenrod is at this late hour. It's all the same thing to her. In all the cities she's ever been to, Claire is completely focused on getting Faulkner to the destination she had in mind: Karma Cafe. True to Claire's prediction, Faulkner doesn't say a word throughout the whole walk. He doesn't say anything when Claire coaxes him inside the cafe. He has no comments to offer when Claire offers a cup of tea for him without asking first. It's only when the man behind the counter serves their respective drinks at last does Faulkner speak. No spoon? Claire pauses, both hands cradling her coffee mug. If Faulkner hadn't pointed it out, she wouldn't have noticed that he did not get a spoon to stir his tea with. Do you seriously expect me to do everything for you? Just ask for one yourself. To her surprise, the man who'd served them is nowhere in sight, and there is no one manning the counter either. Well, use your finger then, she amends after a moment. How he chose to deal with this little problem is none of her business. No other customers. Faulkner glances around, and Claire is pleased to see a bit of emotion other than despair in his countenance, even if it were suspicion. I've been told that that's normal at this time of night. No staff either. What an intriguing observation. Faulkner gives Claire a retiring look. You've anticipated this. Claire relents, somewhat. I've only been to this cafe once before, and it left quite an impression. Inside, she feels satisfied for temporarily distracting Faulkner. She knew he wouldn't be able to resist pulling a place as mysterious as this apart. Faulkner gently swishes the tea around in his cup to stir it before taking a sip. Why have you brought me here? Claire sighs loudly. Because you were acting like a stubborn preschooler and I wanted to come here. She stares at him expectantly. So let me ask you again. Where did you want to go, if not home? Faulkner shrugs, all signs of his alertness fading away. Claire grits her teeth and thumps her fist on the surface of the table. Do you plan on shaping yourself up anytime soon? She asks him very patronizingly. Because frankly, I am getting tired of watching you flail like some poor soap bubble on the breeze. When he doesn't acknowledge her words in any way, Claire just gets angrier. You're pathetic, Faulkner. Pathetic and pitiful. You've lost sight of yourself completely before you could really begin the battle. Watching you like this really pisses me off. To her eagle's twisted satisfaction, Faulkner returns the glare. The hell do you care anyways? He seethes. If you thought taking me to this cafe was going to make anything better, then you are completely off the mark. I don't want your charity, and I sure as hell don't want your pity. Pah! Perish the thought, Claire responds with equal venom. If I had any pity to give you, I'd eat it for dessert. I'd never share it with someone as self-centered as you. Claire recognizes all the visual clues he's giving. His closed-off facial expression, his hunched shoulders, his empty eyes, the pale complexion of his skin. He is very close to his limit. Claire isn't entirely sure why she's baiting him this way. She just has a need to force a reaction out of him no matter what. To say something, even belittling him in the process, to break him open. She just wanted Faulkner to speak, to talk about whatever it is that's bothering him and get over it so he can focus on recovering, before he sank too low into the depths of his own depression. Know this, Faulkner, Claire begins meaningfully. In an alternate universe, I would have smacked you without hesitation, but here I've decided to grace you with 5 minutes to correct yourself before I exact my punishment. Be thankful. Despite her threat, the next 5 minutes pass without incident. Faulkner has gone completely quiet and morose again, and Claire's rage is still simmering underneath the calm facade she has adopted. 10 minutes tick by, and then 15. 20 minutes later, Claire has already finished her drink, and Faulkner's leftover tea has gone cold. Outside the window, the night grows even deeper and darker. There are hardly any cars passing by anymore. The awkward, tense silence that has settled over the gym leaders is deafening. In an alternate universe, I would have arrived at the World Tournament 15 minutes before 10 o'clock. Faulkner's voice is so low, so hoarse and potent with emotion that it pierces through the oppressive quiet. I would have gotten to that parking space before the other driver, and I would have made it to the opening ceremonies on time. Claire's body goes rigid and still, completely focusing on Faulkner and his soliloquy. In an alternate universe, I would have given the other security guards a second chance, Faulkner whispers. I would have had more backup to help me. In an alternate universe, I would have realized immediately that something about this final battle was wrong when I had heard Aerodactyl's howl. His words are coming out faster and faster, like the dam that had been holding back torrents of pent-up emotions had splintered. In an alternate universe, I wouldn't have made such a careless mistake separating from the others without letting them know first, and they would have found me and gotten me to the hospital in time before. Where would he be afterwards? Claire says suddenly. She's trying to lead his train of thought away from his injuries. Alternate universe Faulkner, I mean. Would he immediately have jumped the case and brought the perp to justice? Faulkner laughs dryly, not meeting her gaze. Yeah, and I wouldn't have been forced to face the citizens of Violet City and my family, their cruelly kind smiles and words reminding me over and over what a failure I am. And I would have then continued my pursuit, and one day I would have eventually became a true master of flying types. That sounds very promising. Claire has nothing much to say about that. It isn't as if she has any authority over what happens to Faulkner in an alternate universe. But what about you? Claire wonders. Current universe you. What are you doing? I'll probably leave this case to officers who are better suited to catching criminals and turn in my badge, he admits. I'll most likely have to start looking someone to take over the gym as well. Quite a contrast. I honestly would have liked alternate universe Faulkner better. He actually sounds like he's doing his job, and he should, instead of running away from it. Yes. Just that one word. Yes. But Claire feels it is more than just that. It sounds more like a conclusion Faulkner has come to after many, many sleepless nights in the hospital and at home. She glances down at his hands, folded together on the table. His left hand is covering his scarred right hand, as usual. She never thought about it before, but now she finds the action painful to see. Like her, Faulkner wants to prove to the world that he is strong and capable. His injuries are obviously affecting him more than physically. You know what, Faulkner? I've been thinking about this ever since we left the hospital. Claire leans forward. Even while you're bogged down with crutches, you are awfully independent for a handicapped person. Faulkner is understandably wary of Claire's sudden mood shift. Where are you going with this? As far as I can tell, this. Claire gestures at his crutches leaning on the wall. Is only a minor setback. So what if you've been delayed a few weeks or a year? There's nothing stopping you, current universe, you, from becoming a Pokemon master and from bringing that bastard who did this to you to justice. That is, if you still have the will to do so, then you'd find a way sooner or later. Am I wrong? She isn't promising him that everything will be better. She isn't saying that his injuries will miraculously heal completely one day. Claire is simply telling him that even with his current physical disabilities, Faulkner is still an important member of the community, and still sees him as a comrade and as a gym leader worthy of her respect. And Claire isn't the type to admit this often, which is just the icing on the cake that brings a small smile to Faulkner's face. I like you, he breathes, blinking with shock at his own easy admonition. But he repeats it anyway. I really like you. He was not expecting this woman of all people to coax so much as a twitch of lip out of him. Claire rests her chin on her hand. Usually, when people shower me with gratitude, it's done with more feeling. Hey, I don't know you that all well. He raises a valid point. They aren't friends or lovers, but Claire doesn't think it's a good enough excuse to stop throwing him barbs. It's a good thing nobody else is around the cafe, otherwise you would have botched this from your own self-consciousness. Faulkner is still smiling as he bites his lip. It's as if he's trying to think of something witty to say in response. In the next moment, he reaches out with both arms and pulls Claire in for a hug.